This is one of the biggest privacy cases you've probably never heard about. A billion-dollar menstrual cycle tracking app trusted by hundreds of millions to keep their most intimate information private was at the center of a legal battle alleging it was secretly sending reproductive health details to tech giants like Facebook and Google, despite policies that led users to believe their data would be protected. In this video, I'll walk you through the whole story, from the allegations to the settlements and the jury's verdict against Meta, and why this outcome matters so much. Since this verdict is the first of its kind, it's setting a new standard for how the law responds when sensitive health data is mishandled. If you haven't met me before, hi, my name's Kim and I'm a women's health advocate with a background in fertility science and nutrition. And my mission here is to create a trusted resource where women can make informed decisions about their health. Flo Health was co-founded in 2015 by brothers Dmitry and Yuri Gursky. In under a decade, Flo became the world's most popular menstrual cycle tracking app, with hundreds of millions of downloads and tens of millions of active monthly users. By 2024, it became the first FemTech company to achieve unicorn status, which is tech speak for being valued at over $1 billion US. Flo built its reputation as a trusted space for women to track their cycles, log personal symptoms, and receive health insights. Its privacy policies reassured users that sensitive details about their periods, pregnancy goals, or sexual health would remain confidential and would not be shared with third parties without explicit consent. There was never any reason to question those promises, until someone did, and what they uncovered told a very different story. What followed was a series of court filings, class actions, and a legal battle that forces us to reevaluate the trust we place in these apps that are handling our most sensitive information. The first public glimpse into what was happening came in February of 2019, where the Wall Street Journal ran an investigation. Their reporters intercepted unencrypted information flowing out of the Flo app and over to Facebook. It wasn't just generic technical data, it included unique device identifiers alongside sensitive information about users' cycle and pregnancy status. That reporting sparked wider scrutiny, including an investigation by the Federal Trade Commission. It wasn't long before users started filing lawsuits of their own. According to the Federal Trade Commission, between November 2016 and February 2019, Flo was transmitting deeply personal reproductive health details to companies including Meta, Google, and analytics firms. How exactly was this happening? The sensitive information was flowing through pre-built pieces of code called SDKs, or software development kits. They're essentially bits of code from third parties that help to deliver features like analytics, ads, or login systems. Think of it like giving the contractor keys to your house. They're hired to come in and do a specific job, like fix the plumbing or paint a wall. But once inside, they can also see what's lying around. And if they're not trustworthy, they might just walk out with something valuable. But SDKs themselves are not the problem. They're standard amongst most apps. But according to the Federal Trade Commission, it was the way in which Flo used them that broke the promises in its privacy policy by sharing sensitive reproductive health details that users believed would remain private. The Federal Trade Commission said that Flo sent this data to third parties for analytics and marketing purposes. In other words, those SDKs provided tools that could process the information to run targeted ad campaigns and measure growth, the kind of features that can help an app scale quickly. And that's where Meta comes in, similar to allowing an untrustworthy contractor into your house, and according to the later lawsuits, Meta helped itself to that sensitive information, allegedly feeding it into its own business machine. So in 2021, Flo settles with the Federal Trade Commission, and as is typical in these settlements, Flo was not required to admit any wrongdoing, but it did have to agree to a series of obligations about how it handles health data going forward. As part of the settlement, Flo was forced to change its practices, stop misleading users, ask third parties to delete the data, get explicit consent before sharing sensitive health details, and notify the millions of women that the intimate details they thought were private hadn't been so private after all. The Federal Trade Commission settlement became the first in a series of legal battles. Flo users were also pursuing claims against Meta, Google, and the analytics company Flurry, alleging that these companies took the sensitive health data and used it for their own benefit. Those cases were later consolidated into a single case called Frasco v. Flo Health Inc. et.al. In these lawsuits, the claims against Flo centered around deception and broken promises, assuring users that their period and pregnancy data would stay confidential, while allegedly sending it out the back door to third parties. Against Meta and Google, the claims focused on secretly intercepting and exploiting the same private information without consent. Put simply, the lawsuit said that users had every reason to believe that their most intimate health data would remain private, and all of these companies crossed that line. Over time, Google and Flurry chose to settle. Flo too ultimately reached its second settlement in mid-2025, and that left Meta, and they refused to settle. What unfolded was a rare moment in privacy law, a tech giant actually facing a jury over the handling of sensitive user data. And I need to emphasize that almost never happens. Like the others, most companies would prefer to settle, pay the money, avoid the scrutiny, and walk away without admitting any wrongdoing. But Meta's refusal opened the door to a historic trial. In the trial, jurors had to decide whether Meta secretly intercepted private conversations between women and their health app without consent. The jury's verdict was a unanimous yes, confirming that women's health data had been treated as a resource by a tech giant that had no right to collect it. This verdict is a victory for privacy, and lawyers for Flo users are the ones who said it best. Companies like Meta that profit from users' most intimate information must be held accountable. Meta, on the other hand, rejected the verdict, saying that these claims were false, that its policies prohibit sharing sensitive health data, and that it plans to appeal. Despite Meta's denial, the verdict has been delivered and the truth is out, but the price they'll pay is still unknown. And until we see the consequences, we won't know what this outcome really means for how tech companies are held accountable for this kind of violation. Because until now, for some companies, the benefits of exploiting information have outweighed the risks of being caught. In a time of AI and machine learning, data is money and power. When details about your cycle, your mood, or your symptoms are tied to your device, they become part of a profile that predicts your behavior. And in advertising, predictability is easy to exploit. For companies like Meta or Google, that means sharper targeting, ads delivered at the exact moment you're most likely to click. If you've seen the documentary The Social Dilemma, you'll know why this is such a big deal. That film pulled back the curtain on how tech giants build psychological profiles to influence not just what we buy, but how we think, what we believe, and even how we vote. This verdict matters because it's the first of its kind. Until now, most companies facing lawsuits over data sharing chose to settle. That makes the Meta decision so unusual. It gathered a jury to weigh in the evidence and to say plainly that privacy laws had been broken. But the story isn't finished, because the severity of the punishment will send just as strong a message as the verdict itself. Because if the penalties are small compared to the profits at stake, the message to the industry is clear. Intimate health data is still fair game. And when settlements allow companies to walk away without admitting any wrongdoing, the cycle of betrayal continues. This case raises bigger questions. What protections do we really have when we hand over our most intimate health details to an app? On paper, privacy laws do exist, but in practice, enforcement is messy, and proving bad faith is anything but simple. And the truth is, this case only reached a jury because of a chain of chance events, investigative reporting, regulators stepping in, and one company that refused to settle. So it really makes you wonder, how many other breaches are quietly buried before we ever hear about them? In a system that only reacts once companies are proven wrong, can we really trust privacy promises? Or do those promises collapse the moment they're tested in court? After I released my last video, The Truth About Cycle Tracking Apps, Flo reached out and asked if I'd jump on a private call so they could explain what they do and don't do with user data. I agreed on the condition that we record the conversation so you, my lovely YouTube audience, could also hear their side. Well, as soon as I made that request, they no longer wanted to proceed. To me, that moment really said a lot. It didn't feel like a genuine invitation for transparency, it felt more like PR damage control. When a company tries to manage the narrative behind closed doors, it tells you everything about where their priorities really are. What do you think? Does this verdict go far enough, or does it show that companies can still get away with far too much? Let me know in the comments, I would love to hear your thoughts. So that's all for today's deep dive. Until next time, take care.